Welcome back to another Sabbath School lesson. We are on lesson number 13, and this is going to be Israel in Egypt. Now, the memory verse is going to be taken from Genesis 47 and verse 27. It says, "So Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions there, and grew, and multiplied exceedingly." So now Israel, and that's not just the person Jacob who got his name changed to Israel, but the entire nation of Israel is basically now being moved to Egypt territory. And Joseph is there and he's greeting everyone and they're all settling in. And the idea here is interesting because along the pathway, Jacob, the father of Joseph and the father of this nation essentially, is traveling to Egypt, but he's nervous about going there. And God tells him, don't be afraid to actually go down to Egypt because I'm going to make of you a great nation there. And that's one of the biggest keys and kind of interesting points here in the story, because if you notice that's the same promise that was given initially to Abraham. He's following up on the promise of, remember, go to the land that I will show you, and I'm going to make of a great nation of you. So Abraham was given this promise many years ago, and he goes to the place that God shows him. He's in the land of Canaan, but God does not make of him a great nation in the land of Canaan. He makes of him a great nation in the land of Egypt, a foreign territory. And this is kind of very interesting because basically once the Israelites get down to Egypt, life is super good. And it's very easy because you don't really have to live in tents anymore. Things are kind of set out for you. Jobs are already basically prepared for you. The land is basically thriving and giving. And Joseph is obviously there, so he's making things extra cushiony for you. And the idea is that when things become very comfortable, you start to kind of forget your pathway with God. You start to kind of forget the journey. And as they kind of settle in there, they kind of get stuck in the environment because it's just such an easy environment. And here's the biggest points that I want you to kind of see here, because once they go down there, you're going to start to kind of see something. They grow in numbers and they grow in influence, but they don't grow in God. And that's one of the biggest points that you'll find. Sometimes the place where you grow in influence is not the place where you grow in God. Sometimes the place where you grow in influence is not the place where you grow in God. And some of us, maybe you have a new friends, a new group of friends, or maybe some new job or a new title, or, maybe you're doing some new adventures and activities that you haven't done before. But sometimes when you start to expand your interests and your influence into different areas of your life, maybe you're doing something different in church. Maybe you got a new position. Sometimes once you start to get these influential positions or influential environments where life becomes a little more comfortable, maybe you just got some extra money, you start to kind of forget God. And that's kind of what happens here with the Israelites. So sometimes the place where you actually expand your influence is not always the place where you expand your growth in God. Just be mindful about it. It doesn't mean that you're not supposed to be there, but you may want to just be a little bit mindful about being intentional about God whenever you start to feel comfortable. The second thing that we want to point out here is that Jacob basically is going to bless his children. And I should have said this at the beginning, but basically, if you read over the chapters, Genesis 46 through 50, you're basically going to get the wrap up of the entire lesson. But basically, as Jacob is nearing his death, he ends up blessing his sons and his grandsons. And one of the key themes here that you want to just pay attention to, because there's a lot of blessings here, and there's a lot of things that aren't given. So what happens here is that Jacob reviews the life stories, or at least the tendencies of his children. Like maybe an example is his firstborn Reuben, who ended up sleeping with one of Jacob's concubines. And so basically he starts to review the histories of stuff that they've been through. Simeon and Levi, people that pressed other men to go out and kill unnecessarily. And so these type of actions in their life actually restricted them from getting blessings from Jacob. So when Jacob is at the end of his life, there are things that happen early in these men's lives that they were never punished for. God never actually dealt any blow to them, and Jacob didn't give any punishment to them. But when the blessing and when this inheritance time comes, they're being restricted blessings, basically because of their life decision. And it really just goes to show you, as we close out the book of Genesis, that your life that you live really does matter. Whether it seems like there's an immediate consequence or an immediate blessing to whatever you do, whatever you're doing. Eventually, there's going to be consequences and there's going to be blessings for it. And at the end, when God actually issues an inheritance, there's also going to be some people who have their inheritance restricted from them. Just keep that also in mind. So let's move on here. This is 13th Sabbath, and we're going to do the Profound Meditations review. Ladies and gentlemen, you have just witnessed the book of Genesis. I was trying to make a special effect there. I don't even know if I can make a special effect. Maybe I'll add it into a camera, or at least at another time. But either way, that was supposed to be an epic moment. But essentially, you have just witnessed the book of Genesis. Book of Genesis means beginnings. This is a book of beginnings, and really it's just a series of families, and you can say mess ups. There's mess ups all throughout the story, beginning from Adam and Eve, between, also even super successful people like Noah, who were very dedicated to God, who then after a huge success got drunk, right? And so it's like there's a lot of ups and downs in the story of Genesis. The first 11 chapters goes over 2,000 years of Earth's history. And the last 12 to 50 chapters goes over 360 years of Earth's history. And in this time period, you see the huge amount, the focal point of the book of Genesis is really on the stories of Abraham all the way through Jacob. And what you especially find here is this huge running theme of maybe God giving you a dream or maybe a promise, or maybe sometimes you have nothing to look forward to at all. You feel like maybe you're Abraham and you're there and you're trying to make God's promise happen for you and nothing seems to be working out. And so what do you do in the meantime? You may feel like you're Joseph, in which God gives you some sort of dream and you're wondering, what does it mean and when is it going to be fulfilled? And all of a sudden you hit bottom and you're somehow ended up in some sort of slavery or bondage and you feel restricted and things aren't happening in your life. And now you feel like Joseph, you have nothing to look forward to at all. All hope is lost. So the book of Genesis goes through some really intense themes, but there's something that's consistent always throughout it about the people of God, especially from Abraham to Joseph. And that's one of the key things that we brought up in a couple other lessons, like that when Abraham could not make the promise happen by himself, what did he do in the meantime? He continued to anticipate the desires of others and served others daily. In fact, if you remember that story of him meeting the strangers and running out to meet the strangers and serve these random strangers that came passing through his land, these strangers are actually the very reason why Abraham started to realize when the promise was actually going to be fulfilled. They told him that within a year, when they come back to visit him, he would have a son. Abraham had never known that information before, but the only reason he got that information was because he was serving those strangers. If you remember the story of of Lot, ironically enough, Lot is in Sodom and Gomorrah, terrible territory, but how did Lot escape? The only reason he escaped was because he decided to be hospitable to strangers. He entertained these strangers, and after doing so, they basically pulled him out of Sodom and Gomorrah so that him and his family didn't die. If you also remember the story of Joseph, Joseph has this huge dream. He can't make it happen. He's hitting a lot of ups and downs in life, but what happens? He's serving the butler and the baker in prison, and what comes out of that? He ends up interpreting their dreams and trying to just help them out and assist them because he saw that they were having a bad day. And he's trying to figure out how he can be of help. That eventually leads to Pharaoh actually having a dream and Joseph being brought up to Pharaoh because he actually helped out the butler and the baker. So what you find here in this series of stories is that no matter whether you have a dream or whether you have a goal or whether you have a vision or whether you just depressed and you don't feel like there's nothing to look forward to at all, like Joseph did at different times, one thing that's consistent is that are you anticipating the desires of others and serving them wherever you can daily? It is often those points of your life that you're serving somebody else that God uses that small task that you helped another person with, or that mindset that you helped another person with, to help assist them to actually rise you to the next place in life that he's wanting you to be at. Sometimes your goals and your visions are often fulfilled as you serve someone else. And that, my friend, is the book of Genesis, the book of beginnings. And that is the Profound Meditations Sabbath School Sermon. I'm Oswald Walker. I'll see you next time.